Lieutenant Commander Data discovered a certain level of impatience when he calculates a lengthy time interval to the nearest second. Human intuition and instinct are not always right, but they do make life interesting. And therapists are always the worst patients, except for doctors, of course. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation Season 4, Episode 10, entitled The Loss. Story by Hilary Bader, teleplay by Hilary Bader, and Alan J. Adler and Vanessa Green. That's a tag team right there. And directed by our good buddy Chip Chalmers. This was, let's see, this was December 29th. 1990. Where were you? And how are you today, Sirach Lofton?
I'm great. I'm doing great.
Something I noticed here is that there are about 5 weeks in between the previous episode and this one. It went from like
November 20th or something?
Yeah, 17th to December 29th. That's like 6 weeks or something. But that's kind of a weird. You would think that the winter break would be a little later. Like it would start in December and end in January, not start in November and then end still in December. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe back then you guys would get back to work for that week between Christmas and New Year. That just seems weird, though.
Yeah. Well, now that you say that, I'm sure there was a break for Christmas. But yeah, I don't know that you would be back before New Year's. Anyways, these are air dates, so usually these stuff is recorded long before these air dates. So the gaps are mostly about probably scheduling and programming.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm just like thinking about the poor editors or something that are coming in on like December 27th. But yeah, you're probably right. I mean, that stuff's already long done, like weeks before. You're right. What were you going to say?
It's done weeks before. So what I was going to say is that I used to go visit Kerry McLuggage's office when I was doing the show, and I'd pop in every once in a while. And
isn't that what basketball players make the rookies do? Kerry McLuggage, right? That's what they do to the rookies.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm sure he would definitely like that. But yes. So one of the things that he would have in his office is a board with all the time slots and what shows were being aired on those time slots. So that was always interesting to me that there was a man in the room moving these magnets on the wall. It's just like, this goes at 8:00. This is going to be at 10, 9:30. And so this process is, could be moved and interrupted by a lot of things, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, September 11th happens, right? Whatever you had on the programming schedule is now moved around because they're like, we're going to do 24-hour coverage of this event. We're not rerunning episodes of Charles in Charge right now. You know what I mean? So, different events in time periods could affect programming. So, for example, this could have happened during the Rodney King riots or something around that time, right? And boom, it would change. O.J. Simpson was another example of programming being pushed aside based on coverage. So that could be one explanation. I'm just putting it out there for the audience because these are the kinds of processes that go on in the decision making.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and that's why I like to kind of look at the date and try to think what was going on at the end of 1990. Nothing too crazy. I remember 89. There was the big Loma Prieta earthquake in my town. You guys in LA had one in 94, I think the Northridge one, 94, 96. Rodney King was around 92 or 3. O.J. Simpson was maybe 96, the verdict, it was that. So there were definitely things going on in those days. And it's always fun to kind of look back at things, like the dates, and even the writing gets kind of affected by it. Sometimes the writing, kind of goes in the direction of the times, But
Yeah, yeah,
this particular episode, one thing I want to point out as we get into it, and as everybody is liking this video and subscribing to the channel, hitting the bell icon for notifications, and the people that are listening in are giving us a 5-star rating and a nice review, and we really appreciate that. And also, please go to patreon.com/the7th rule and become a patron. We got all kinds of fun things for you to do as a patron, and also it helps keep the lights on here because, man, we run a tight ship and a tough operation, and we need your support to, this high production value and all that. It's a big deal. Anyway, but we do really appreciate any support to everybody. Patreon.com/the7th rule. So we got to see Ensign Allenby for a second episode in a row. Remember the ensign? Like, it kind of,
is it
the blonde
Ellerby or Allenby?
Allenby.
Oh, I wrote down Ellerby.
Yeah, it's a weird one. When I first heard it last week, I thought they said Ellenby. So I looked it up and it's Allenby. So what's cool about that is I don't remember ever seeing a random ensign of the week being on 2 weeks in a row, except for the one that they introduced. I'm blanking on her name, but everybody in the live chat, you can tell us or in the comments below. The lady that spilled her coffee on Picard, if you remember, like around the second season, Sonia Gomez, and then, or spilled his coffee on his own shirt, and then she ended up becoming kind of friends with Geordi, and they were setting this thing up. She was introduced 2 episodes, and then she was gone forever. This one, Ellenby, 2 episodes, and they're giving her some lines. And you're thinking, oh, is this the new Wesley Crusher replacement? Gone forever after that. It's kind of a bummer because we like new characters. We like having some consistency there rather than Ensign of the Week. She doesn't even have to be there every week. Once every 3, 4, 5, 6 episodes, great, like Chief O'Brien. But anyway, that's Ensign Allenby.
Allenby, Ellerby, Allenby. She's got a lot of names. One of the things that I wish would be done in these situations is a slight introduction into these characters. When you're sitting at the helm, I feel like you're so much in the foreground and in the picture of this production that a light introduction would be warranted in the dialogue. I would like for Picard, for example, to say, Lieutenant Warp, show Ensign Ellerby to her station or something to that effect, right?
Yeah.
And then a quick line about she's just transferred here from the from the Saratoga, and she'll be joining with us on a few missions, something to that effect. It's like 2 lines or whatever, but
You're right. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, even something just as simple as, and we've seen things like this before, but something just as simple as, Ensign Ellenby laying a course, blah, blah, blah. She says, okay. And he says, and by the way, welcome to the ship. Your resume was exemplary over at the USS, whatever. And then we go, oh, cool, new character. Right. You're right. Just 1 or 2 lines. And we're like, okay, got it. We have like a feeling of who this person is.
Yes, and they're welcomed aboard publicly as opposed to just like this random person we see and we're like, yeah, who is this guy that's talking all of a sudden? Like, like a main decision maker at the helm, right? So it's like the helm is such an important position. If you're at one of the positions to me that are, if you're standing in the back in the security position, then I would kind of be like, all right, that's just a security guy in the back. He's he's on his ship. But if you're actually steering the ship or firing photons or, on the comms,
Getting
like
lines. I think really just, if you're getting lines, more than just like one of like, I don't know, sir.
Yes.
But she gets like 5 or 6 lines. I mean, this is a legitimate character introduction that just disappears.
So I would prefer that. A little bit of an introduction would be great in these scenarios. I think they just I don't know if how much thought goes into that. It's like, okay, we're having a new character, let's cast somebody, and they just go through that process. But I don't know if they actually think, hey, from Audie's perspective, maybe we should just give them a slight intro, or maybe they feel that gives the actor a sense that they're going to be there longer than they probably will be. So I don't know what the rationale is behind that, if there is thought or not enough thought, but it would be nice for me. And to piggyback off of that is one other tiny adjustment that I would like to see in these episodes, or in just in Star Trek in general, is I feel like there's zero chatter or banter amongst each other when they're actually on the helm, right? So a little bit, like, because when you're at work, you might there might be something like, hey, can you
Mhm.
pass me that you got to stay, or hey, how's your wife doing? It's just like, or how's your baby? Some like little work related chit chat would be nice. And you can still be doing your job, but they're like robotic about, like, okay, I'm monitoring the frequencies, and there's no like, hey, Worf, little chit chat, like, what is that? A new cologne you got on or something? Something.
Colonial cologne. That's what it sounded like you're going to say when you said cologne. So you know who is good at that? The Orville. The Orville does that because they're a comedy, and so they have their little chit chat. They talk about getting a cap for the bridge. They talk about their favorite soda, things like that. Deep Space Nine does it somewhat, but they would do it at the beginning of every episode and then kind of leave it alone the rest of the way. But yeah, that would be nice. I mean, the most we ever got was Wes and Data exchanging looks. When something happens, they like look, at each
Yeah,
other.
yeah,
I'm like, that's a
yeah.
kid and a robot, okay. But yeah, that would be interesting if, they're like, well, maybe part of that is because it is Data up there. Who's gonna giggle around with Data, or maybe they could put like a kick me sign on his back or something. That'd be fun.
Hey, how's your processing speed doing, Data? My processing speed is doing wonderful. All right.
We also got
Um,
another character here, by the way. Oh, guess what Ensign Allenby's first name is? I'll give you a hint. It's Tess.
okay.
Tess Allenby. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. Okay.
Test
So
Allenby. Okay.
we also got another new character introduced today, and her name was, geez,
Now, this is the guest star who was with Counselor Troy.
yeah, Ensign Janet Brooks.
Where
Ensign.
do you get the name from? Because I don't remember them saying names.
No, I had to look on IMDb because they did not say it.
Okay.
To my
Okay.
knowledge, they did not say it. They might have said Ensign Brooks when Troy was talking to Picard about, or Riker about it. She was like reporting to Picard about like, oh, Ensign Brooks, blah blah blah. I think they might have said Ensign Brooks
Okay.
then, but I had to
Okay.
look it up
Okay.
to find that out. So Kim Braden plays Ensign Janet Brooks. She also later on plays Captain Picard's wife in Star Trek Generations, the very first movie in 1994. So that's
Hmm.
interesting. She's got an interesting hairdo in this episode, but she's also married to a rather successful Star Trek director.
What?
Yeah. And his
Okay.
name is David Carson.
Oh, wow. This is crazy.
Yeah, and David Carson and Kim Braden were actually together at a table at the most recent STLV this year.
I know. That's why it's so crazy, because I just met the both of them.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I just met. I had never met her before. Of course, I know David already, and so we had a nice chance to have a reunion moment at the Star Trek Las Vegas Creation Convention.
Yeah.
Um, and then he introduced me to his wife, uh, which is, the first time I actually met her, and he was trying to explain. who I was, and she's like, "I know, honey, I know um, who he is." So, but yeah, that is crazy. So she gets to play is when she plays Picard's wife in the movie. Is she playing the same character that she's playing in this episode, or
No, no, and it's kind of a smaller thing. It's kind of like a flash forward dream sequence kind of thing. So there's not a ton to it. This is her role in this episode's a bigger role.
okay? And I thought she was fantastic. It's just such a small little circle because I thought
Mm.
she's fantastic in this episode. I actually really liked her, and I did not recognize her because her hair is a different color in real life. I think she has darker hair, right? If I'm not mistaken. So this is a probably a wig piece, and the look is so different for me when I see her. But now I'm seeing some of the facial features and stuff. So yeah,
Yeah, the hair looks like 1983. You know,
yeah,
it's an
yeah.
interesting choice.
It's a very dated hairstyle.
But it
Um,
is a good role. Because
oh, I loved it.
it could have been a role that was just like in the first 3 minutes and then we move on, or maybe it bookends at the very end when Troy learns a thing. But it was actually this recurring character within the episode that kept coming back, and it was actually a little bit more
Yeah,
involved. The character was than I remember. I was like, "That's cool, man. Good for Kim Braden. Like getting a pretty good, guest spot. This wasn't just a 1 day thing. This wasn't just like a introductory, segment thing, but she was up and down throughout the episode. It was actually really good. And I actually think this episode is better than I remember it. What I remember of this particular episode is two things. I mean, the episode was okay from what I remember, but there were two takeaways that when I think of this episode, I go, oh, there were two things that I thought were really good that really impacted me when I first saw it way back in the day.
yeah,
One was the way Deanna Troy explains her loss of feeling, the way she's just like, all I'm seeing is like blank faces. And I remember that hit me, and it made me kind of be able to understand the loss of, her empathy skills, where she's now just looking at blank faces, whereas normally she's looking at faces, but she's feeling something at the same time. And I remember when they said that, I was like, that's a good description. It makes it to where I can understand this thing that
yeah.
should theoretically be understandable and impossible to understand because it's not a real thing, as far as we know. Um, and the other thing was the idea of these two-dimensional beings and getting caught in the two-dimensional beings. Because once you start talking about 3 dimensions and 2 dimensions, it gets really interesting. And the way they show it, it's like at an angle, but then it kind of turns and like that. So you could see, oh, this is why I didn't see it. So
Hmm.
those were two things that stuck with me as being very good, very interesting ways of introducing and describing new ideas. And so I remember really being impacted by those. And those were like things that stuck with me for whatever it's been, 30 years.
Yeah. One of the things I like about Star Trek is when it goes into uh, deal with science fiction themes that are based in some sense of reality, taking something from reality, from physics, from shared knowledge, and applying it to an episode and exploring it. So the idea of what a two-dimensional being would behave like in a three-dimensional plane was very well explained, and it's something that I think is now being considered in the other way around, which is how we as three-dimensional beings are interacting with four-dimensional beings, and what would that
Yeah.
be like? So it would be the same relativity that we saw with this 2D 3D situation where one can't really comprehend the other.
Hmm.
Um, a four-dimensional being would see us in the same way that we see that two-dimensional being, and being that we don't have one of the parameters of the plane of that existence, right? In this
Hmm.
particular case, two-dimensional only have, like, let's say, length and width with no depth, and um, as you keep adding parameters, then you become invisible on the other person's spectrum, on the other dimension
Right,
spectrum.
exactly. And that's what's interesting when, and I don't know too much about this, but I know that it is said that the fourth dimension is time. And what's interesting about that is, so that's why it's very difficult for things in two dimensions to intersect with things in three dimensions. Because for something that's like this, but doesn't go, doesn't have any depth, then the only intersection that's possible is if the three-dimensional thing happens to be at exactly this depth. But anywhere else it won't hit. Same thing with three and four dimensions, the fourth dimension being time. Let's say, for example, this baseball is three dimensions, right? You got length, width, height, right? But what about time? So let's say I put my finger on here, right, for that second. Okay. So that fourth dimension is time. If I've got my finger there, cool. But the only way a four-dimensional thing would intersect with that is if they happen to be there, like at that exact time, or that we would intersect with them at that exact time. Because if I go like this and are just there for a millisecond, then something that exists in four dimensions, there's no intersection there, because so I could put a penny here 15 years from now, and it's not going to intersect with my finger being there because they're at different times. That fourth dimension doesn't line up. Anyway, it can be explained much better than how I just did, but that's what's interesting about dimensions is theoretically something that lives in two dimensions can't intersect with three dimensions unless it's perfectly lined up, and then third and fourth, and then fifth dimension. I don't even know what that is. I think it's like castor oil or something. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's a movie with Chris Tucker.
No, that's the fifth
No,
element.
oh, Fifth Element. Okay, never
Yeah,
mind.
I think.
No, I don't know. I think that they did a good job with the 2D, 3D explanation in the graph that they were showing the
Yeah.
captain, and just that little graph pretty much summarized, you know, the dilemma that they were facing in this particular episode, which I thought was great. I enjoyed the science behind it. I enjoyed the revelation that, like a moth to fire to a flame, that this particular two-dimensional object was being attracted to something or going towards
Mhm.
something. So all of those kinds of realizations were great, but more importantly for me was some of the other things that I got out of this episode, particularly the fact that we barely get to see Troy at work doing her job as a professional. So this actually opened with her doing counseling, which is like,
Yeah.
I don't know, 4 seasons in, and I think this is the first time I can remember seeing her actually being like, in the office counseling, and she was doing a great job, I thought, with this, with Kim Braden as the guest star. I thought the two of them played well opposite each other. And I thought in general that Deanna Troy really was shining in this episode. I thought Marina Sirtis did a great job as an actor in this particular episode, kind of, because there was a moment, she switches from the character we normally see into this more less patient person who was more emotional and um, even confrontational.
Yeah.
Uh, and I felt like I saw the difference in the performance as far as how she acts when she's Troy with the powers as opposed to Troy without the powers. And I did notice a behavioral change that she was frustrated, and I thought she delivered that in her performance really well.
Hmm. I also have thoughts on that, but let's take a quick break. And then when we get back, we're going to dissect this episode a bit more because, again, I think this episode holds up a lot better than I expected. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule.